U.S. Air Force, very simple. 1996, they had mismatches, and they had about 100 and recruiters, the people trying to sell the military, the people you see in the malls, the shopping malls, and they found that they had approximately 100 mismatches a year. They factored in how much to train them, to recruit these recruiters in the Army, to train them in a profession, and then to fire them, to downsize them because they're not performing according to quota. After 6 to 7 months, that came to $30,000 a head. Times 100 mismatches were up to $3 million. Okay, and so anyway, the first time that stock reform profiling was done was here. I reviewed and crunched the numbers on this, or helped crunch the numbers on this. Now, I just want to just impress you. What is the bottom line here? This is, what did the U.S. Air Force gain from this? Very simple. It's not an academic exercise for publishing a paper, which is good and nice and important. By using this, implementing this model, the one on the slide, the page before that, they cut down, they increased their ability threefold to predict who will be a good recruiter. They reduced mismatches by 92% the first year, translated to $2.7 million. Well, that's the 2.7, at least, because I think that's the top of the iceberg. If you have better recruiters, more professional, they're going to recruit better people. They'll have less problems with lawsuits and people messing up in the military. They'll make better decisions. So that's why I say 2.7 is just the top of it. And again, GAO submitted to the Secretary of Defense. Steve Langhorne was the head of HR in Beefeaters, which is a subsidiary of Whitbread in the UK. There's about 1,000. They're fairly good restaurants throughout the UK. And he was looking at the emotional intelligence of restaurant managers and how that, he was looking at retention, he was looking at clients, customer satisfaction, he was looking at the bottom line. They had to be working in this area for at least 1 year as managers to set the tone. And we were looking at, well, excuse me, this was his doctorate. He was the head of HR, he did a doctorate at a university in the UK, and I helped him set up part of the research end of it, what statistical stuff to use, and I looked at the things afterwards, and this is what he comes up with. Okay, I'm not going to, don't pay attention to this so much, but just at that 0.47 and rounded out 0.5, that's good, 66%. It could be better, not probably. But here's the big thing. Here's the big thing. Bottom line, this is like, so there evidence that it can is predicting annual profit growth in this particular. So they looked at the percentage increase in a 12-month period. Restaurants run by managers with higher emotional intelligence showed an annual profit growth of 22% in the same year as 2000, 2001, versus an annual average of 15%. At that particular, they increased 15% naturally. And the people who were emotionally intelligent managers, their restaurants were doing, they increased 22%. That was at that particular time translated into 110 million pounds sterling a year. This compares with an earlier version, less sophisticated, run by in the finance division. It's a combination of Kate Cannon, who worked there a number of years ago, and Doug Lennick, who's one of your VPs, who left about 4 or 5 years ago, a friend and a colleague. And they did, on a less sophisticated program in the 1990s, their increase amounted to $200 million increase financial advisors in what they did. Now, that's a little digression to Amex. Going back, then I looked at males and females. I helped, he did it, I was guiding and working with him, supervising. Restaurants, that's in general, 22%. Restaurants run by female managers with higher emotional intelligence showed an annual profit growth. Their restaurants of 28% in comparison to 15%. That amounted to 200 million pounds sterling a year. So again, it's not an academic BS article. It amounts to, okay, and that's it. The only very last, and that's very, okay, this one, how various the ways it is used. hiring and downsizing, not in bold, it's not nice to talk about that, but okay, that's a possibility. Succession planning, group training, and I'll tell you, I'll explain all of this later if you wish. And then it's more cost effective, okay, than other modalities like assessment centers. And I don't want to step on toes here. You know, so many people love assessment centers, and it's good. But here's the thing. This is I did the highest particular things that I knew in the Star Performance program. Less than 600, and it gets lower, and I can explain why it drops lower than 600 as the organization is using it over time. The average price in assessment centers is about $1,200, sometimes it goes up $2,000 per person, and I'm looking at our results, 0.5%, the correlation between the people we pick and how they're performing is about 0.55. With assessment centers looking at two major studies, one in the UK, one in the US recently, one was recent, one was in the late 80s, as an average of 0.28. It was a predictability. So cost less, cost effective, it's more effective. And then the person to complete this little battery of tests or whatever it might be, less than an hour. If it's only the EQI, average of 20 minutes, a half an hour. When you do an assessment center, you're taking the person, that's why I say it's more than $1,200. You're taking perhaps a senior executive out, not working for 7-8 hours. So that's what I'm saying is that my case risks. I think this is a tactical ploy in introducing new things that you think, like at the HR level, you know what your organization needs, but you're up against CEOs who've been there for a long time, and you have to convince them. I have found, and okay, this is based on a little bit of experience with this, if you can go in, and with all due respect, because I see myself as HR and external and whatever, if you can go into an organization and convince that a change technique that you think is worthwhile, if you can go to the very, very top, that's the tactical thing. If you can go to the CEOs and the vice presidents and influence them to make the decisions, quite often you shorten the period of time. Because the way it typically goes, we'll talk to HR people, then they've heard a fantastic conference, then they have to go back and convince the people who signed the checks and okay it, the program, and the ping pong goes back and forth for months. The greatest success has been when you can go into an organization and convince the very top executives. They're sold on it, boy, they work, and things flow. So that's just one thing. So that's one thing, and what I'm going to say now is not related to that. Here's this idea. This is something else I'm throwing out from left field. You say, how do we hire, how do we promote the best people to lead the organization? How do we identify and hire our executives? And you might have, maybe people have some of these attributes. Maybe people that are really good in time management and very experienced, and also some experience factors. You bring all these factors together. Here's another thing I'm going to throw out. It's not my idea. It came from Fidelity UK years ago. It's like organizations go through lifestyles, startups, upward incline, static, death. When you're hiring a leader, quite often we do this generically. But what if you start targeting people that are good on the startup, but maybe not good on the plateau, yes, and other leaders with different attributes? They know how to pull an organization out of a dip when it's dying.